August 9th, 1967. The early morning dew sits in still silence among the cool grass and trees surrounding the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. Final checks for the imminent launch are finished. Then, Mission Control, with as much energy as their coffee machine can give them at 4 in the morning, gives the command to disrupt the peaceful and quiet darkness. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to For All Kerbalkind. Today, Katlas is lifting a communications satellite for a private company, aiming for an eccentric 1 by 4.5 thousand kilometer orbit with an inclination of 40 degrees. Not a huge payout by any means, but I do love a good Katlas launch. The launch vehicle performs beautifully and hands over control to its Agena upper stage. And that's that. Mission complete. Lunch money from a happy customer acquired. The next 3 weeks we spend monitoring the approach of our Mars relay satellites while keeping tabs on the Skylab crew's stress levels. A plan is in place to bring Trinity 8 back home a little bit early, but we'll get to that later. For now, 4 interplanetary communication satellites called Marley are now arriving at the Red Planet, each in turn, a few days apart. Each satellite will aim to loosely capture into an initial eccentric parking orbit with an apoarion of 420,000 kilometers. From there, the relay will be spread out and their relative planes will be aligned much further down the line when our launch schedule isn't taking our attention elsewhere. For now, on September 13th, all 4 satellites have reached their initial orbit around Mars. We will come back to circularize and align their relative inclinations later on, as there are 2 more events currently pulling our attention away from Marley. Shifting focus to another of Earth's planetary neighbors, we have a 4-satellite relay network on its way to Venus as well. These lucky enough to hitch a ride on an Agena satellite bus, being used as an interplanetary mothership of sorts for the first time. All that's needed right now is a quick 4-second burst of its engine to fine-tune our trajectory. It's back to coasting once more for 2 more months. Back down on Earth, a plan has been put in place to help assist the stranded crew of Skylab in returning back home, utilizing yet another Agena satellite bus. The plan is simple. Take a mission profile utilized by Gemini in the past to practice rendezvous and abnormal propulsion attitudes. Essentially, we'll use the Agena to give the Trinity spacecraft a little boost, theoretically making up for the lack of enough return fuel on board currently. As the sun rises over the eastern horizon, so do we. Titan 3E performs perfectly, reaching an almost circular orbit just above 300 kilometers. So far, so good. And after a 15-minute coast while flight controllers experience some anomalies with disappearing trajectory calculations, the Kentaur stage lights its engines for TLI. Burn complete. Our Kentaur stage is now spent. Now it's up to the Agena itself to bring us the rest of the way there. For whatever reason, we are still unable to see our intercept with the moon at all, so we won't be able to fine-tune our trajectory until we've actually reached its gravitational sphere of influence. So we can toss out a little bit of fuel efficiency because of this, but it shouldn't be a problem in the long run. Arriving at our intercept with the moon, our trajectory is finally visible, and it's an impact. Easily correctable now though, and our relative inclination to Skylab isn't far off either. So, all that we need to do now is rendezvous, which becomes slightly delayed due to losing connection with our far side lifeline, the Loros B satellite. As soon as we have connection again, a rendezvous is plotted with our lunar station. Silently drifting closer and closer to Skylab, the Agena finally burns its engine to slow its roll, putting it at a coasting speed of 4.8 meters per second, safely away from the station. The crew aboard Skylab now undock their Trinity spacecraft, having performed all startup procedures and necessary checklists for leaving the station temporarily unattended, probably for the next 5 months or so, as the next scheduled flight out to Skylab is waiting for a tech node unlock, and new payload integration as well, all of which takes a lot of time. But more on that in the future. For now, Trinity 8 has a chance to get home safe and sound, and they are not going to pass it up. Michael, Mark, and Neil drift away from Skylab and rendezvous with the slowly passing Agena rescue craft. Its lights making it annoyingly quite visible for the crew, but ground control insists on them staying active until docking is achieved. As Trinity coasts closer, control reference changes from looking at the numbers to simply visually lining up with Agena. But at this point, it becomes a bit of a struggle to maintain relative attitude for a moment. And after a few moments, we realized Agena has actually started spinning end over end a little. One of our janitorial interns must have bumped a button on a command panel or something. Well, once that's sorted out, aligning with the craft is actually a piece of cake, and the two spacecraft become one. Some maths are calculated, and yep, we have just enough fuel in the Agena and the CSM to get home. And in just under 2 hours, the crew of 3 will make their return burn and say goodbye to the moon for quite a long time. As soon as Agena depletes its fuel, the crew of Trinity 8 whip their ride around and burn the majority of their remaining fuel as well, and it works like a charm. Trans-Earth injection complete. The crew drift to an apogee of 533,000 kilometers above the Earth. Although a long shot from the Soviet Venusian flyby performed not long ago, this now holds the record for the furthest American Kerbonauts have been away from the Earth, just a speck of blue in the endless black. One that the crew will be eagerly watching appear larger and larger in their small windows, anxious to be back home on solid ground and not cramped up here anymore. Returning home, the situation is monitored closely from the ground. Mark and Neil Kerman's stress levels begin to reach dangerous levels. They report hearing voices as Michael does the best he can to make sure everyone keeps a level head. Days turn to hours, turn to minutes, all the while racing the clock on life support and sanity until finally, on October 2nd, the crew is able to separate their re-entry module from the service module and make ready to plunge into the atmosphere above the South Pacific Ocean, without any time to lose. While I bring you to a makeshift camera on board for Trinity 8's re-entry, I thought I'd let you guys in on some behind-the-scenes planning that's been going on, just to sort of explain where we're at and where we're going, especially because I, in fact, did not stream the footage for this week, so you lurkers out there are totally in the dark this episode. Sorry about that. Streams are coming back soon. Things have just been crazy, awkwardly timed, just like Trinity 8, funny enough. So I would have liked to have a lot more missions in this episode, but I simply ran out of time. For the next 2 episodes or so, though, we kinda already have a plethora of vehicles in the build queue, and some pretty awesome tech nodes being unlocked too. So let's talk about that. First up, we have interplanetary exploration. Some launches to fly by Mercury, Ceres, and Vesta, all being launched on Chiton 3Es. And then a more interesting of the bunch will be sending a glider into the atmosphere of Venus to float its way down and scuba up all the science again. I'm especially excited for that one, if not only for the reason that I get to build another little plane. And if you're not familiar at all by now, I absolutely love building planes. In fact, that's another thing we didn't get to this episode, even though I really wanted to. I have built a new plane. You see, Carnasa built and flew a Concorde, Beardy built and flew a Tupolev, which is really similar to the Concorde, and, well, I didn't bother making a supersonic airliner myself yet, but the last couple weeks, I started looking at different ideas for things like the 2707 or the L2000, or God forbid, some sort of supersonic flatbed or something. But then I had the grand idea of, what if I just built my own aircraft instead? And what if I made it even faster, right? And with this, a new project was born, Project Hypercruise, a little goal of mine to achieve a working hypersonic airliner. And I spent several days working on a first concept alone, which you'll see next episode, I guarantee. This one's called Swift Mark IV, and it is capable of cruising transatlantic at around Mach 1.4, or if we burn more fuel, it can cruise around Mach 3.7 and fly around the States and such. Now that is still far from hypersonic. That's still just supersonic, but I'm trying to push the envelope with that design. And if I just can't get up there high enough and fast enough, then it's back to the drawing board for Mark V and beyond. But I'll get into more details about it next episode. There's also some secret things I plan on doing with the Blackbird, as well as giving myself an excuse to create some runways and things in White Sands, New Mexico. Let's see, there's a Project Ringtone, not quite in launch cadence yet, with the goal of establishing a military communications network. Project Clear Skies, which is a fun one. Basically, do you guys remember when I shot down a satellite? Of course you do. Yeah, basically more of that, but with scout launch vehicles, possibly, performing LEO debris removal. Essentially ASAT spring cleaning, if you will. And the first target is the K4 outpost, because I want that thing gone, and it's a perfect target for removal. That still needs some testing and work. But on to less secretive things, we are going to be expanding Skylab, actually. The crew having that much stress is partly due to the lack of useful habitation space on the station. So the next Skylab mission is going to add a habitat module with more docking ports and some reaction wheels. And the reason Skylab's going to be unoccupied for several months now is because of that. I'm waiting for bigger reaction wheels to unlock, and then it'll take another 4 months or so for craft file integration and rollout and such. So yeah, all of that takes a lot of time. But that leads me to the fact that we are going to be spending $2 million on another launch pad for Cateran 5 so we can keep up a faster launch cadence than we have been. Because the rollout for that vehicle is 60 days, and I have a couple in storage right now, a third almost built, and several more in the build queue. There's instances where maybe I don't want to wait several months before their launches. It's going to be $2 million, which is half of what we have stored up by now, but hopefully we have some plans to get some more money in the future. We'll be launching a unique vehicle to the station in lunar orbit as well, something capable of rescuing Kerbals on the surface and bringing them back to the station in the case that something goes terribly wrong and they're stranded on the surface. And there's so much more. There's even more coming after all of that. So rest assured, things are happening and we are getting to them slowly. So thank you for being patient. I know this video is pretty late, but I hope there's still some excitement out there about watching what unfolds next. I know I'm excited. But before I just continue rambling for hours, which I definitely could do, let's go back to the flight. The crew of Trinity 8 making it back home. They're splashing down in the South Pacific, and their stress levels once again are still dangerously high. I don't know how high they get before something bad happens, but I am very glad that I didn't have to find out today. Got up to 77%. I think stress levels reached higher than that on the Soviets' Venus flyby mission, and something could have gone terribly wrong, but luckily didn't. But regardless, that's going to be it for this episode. I know it doesn't seem like a whole lot has gone on, but behind the scenes, a whole lot is going on, and it's going to translate to cool episodes in the near future. So, thank you all so much for watching. A special shout out to Chris Gebert, Darth Tehil, Guy Called Odin, and Mr. Blue Star, and everyone else on the Patreon for your support. I love you all. I wish I could make tons more content. I wish there was 40 hours in a day, and that my brain was not mush. But until next time, seriously, check for commies under your bed. You can never be too careful.